Hey guys, what's up? And welcome back to another weekly podcast with Jay Bustin and myself. Today, we are going to be covering a rather interesting topic. I would definitely say for me and most likely Jay. I know we've actually kind of discussed things like this before and on other sources that y'all probably don't know, probably in private. But it's kind of a rather open and vague one that could go in a lot of different directions, but a good synopsis of it is going to be morality and gaming.
Hey, Matt,
Sure.
do you want to hear a joke?
Not really, but I feel like you're going to tell me anyways.
I mean, if you don't, I don't have to tell you.
Fine,
It'd
go
be
ahead.
kind of rude to just say, I
Fine.
don't want to hear a
See,
joke.
now you've
This
guilt
actually
tripped me.
isn't a joke. This is a true story about one of my wife's coworkers. So my wife was at work and she was talking with her coworkers about what they were going to do on their vacation time or whatever. And one of them was like, "Oh, I'm going to Waco, Texas to visit my family." And one of her other coworkers was like, "Oh, Waco, that sounds really familiar." And they were like, "Well, yeah, there was like a mass murdering there, a long time ago." And one of her other coworkers, the fourth one, kind of chimed in. She goes, "How can there be a mass murder in Texas?" And they were like, "Well, what do you mean?" She goes, I thought mass murderings could only happen in Massachusetts." Dead serious.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So anyway, that was that anecdote. And the reason I brought that story up was, one, because I thought it was hilarious, and two, because that's kind of what spawned this to happen. Matt and I were talking while playing another game once that, I didn't grow up with shooters. Mm-hmm. I grew up with an N64 and I played 007 GoldenEye at a friend's house. And when my mom found out about that, she was really upset, and she was like, "You're not allowed to do that. Like, you can't go over his house, or if you do, you certainly can't play that game." I wasn't allowed to play shooters growing up. And quite frankly, I still think she's not thrilled about it. And her whole logic was, she's like, if you look at like the people who go out and kill a bunch of people, that's what gets them interested, is like by playing these violent video games. And she's not like one of those crazy overprotective mother types. I know someone whose mother, no, this is a college person. He's 22, 23 years old. His mother is just now letting him use the internet freely at his house. Like that's a level of overprotection that I'm like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
But, my mom wasn't like that. I had a ton of freedom or whatever, but she was like, I just don't want that in the house. As I grew up, she was like, I can't stop you from doing what you do on your own time, but don't bring it in the house. And I can respect that because it's her house.
Right.
But, that kind of got the talk going. It's like, I respectfully disagree with that mindset about how by playing a violent video game, you become a violent person. I mean, not to mention there's like 1,000 case studies disproving that, right. But I don't think it's a genuine worry, and I think it 100% has to do with you as a parent.
Oh yeah,
like if
you can't, not just with violent stuff, but really with kind of
with
anything. Like if there's people that say, well, if you play video games, you do this. If you play like there are so many things that they try to blame video games on, where in reality, it's much simpler than that. It's just that either they are just allowing their kids to do whatever they want when they want, and that is the problem.
I think it comes down to, and I hate to comment on parenting because I'm not a parent.
Correct.
I hang out with, in public or whatever, and I see parents doing things with their kids or whatever, kids running around screaming, and I think to myself, like, man, there's no way I'm ever going to allow my kids to do that. But, like, I don't know what it's like to raise another human, It's probably very difficult or whatever. But the one thing that I do know is that you have to teach your kids to discern the difference between fantasy and reality.
Absolutely.
So, like in a video game, like, yeah, it's perfectly acceptable to grab a machine gun and shoot everything you see in sight. In real life, under no circumstances is that, okay. And I think it really comes down to the parent to teach kids the difference between reality and fantasy.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a very huge point, and that goes in the realm of media in 10 million different directions, not just gaming.
Right.
And like a huge one that would be case in point for me is that celebrities in and of themselves, or actors or anything like that, have never been role models to me at any point in my life. because at a young age, and it wasn't something that like my parents were like really strict on, like, hey, you have to know that this is an actor or anything like that. Like they found a way to make it known that, hey, that was a person pretending to be this person. And you can still enjoy the character itself. Like, it didn't ruin it for me that I understood at a young age that that was an actor. That had nothing to do with it. To me, it helped because I had that separation. And if anything ever happened in the world, as it does every single freaking day, or some actor does something stupid and they're like, oh, well, they're no longer a role model. Well, that was your fault for having an actor as a role model in the first place, in my opinion, usually, because they're a person with all eyes on them at all time, which causes a lot of stress and all kinds of different things to happen. But it's, in my opinion, just not the greatest of ideas. Whereas the counter to that, a good idea, in a sense, depending on there's a lot of different scenarios here, is for a character to possibly be a role model. That can be a lot better, because a written character in a storyline is never going to go do drugs or go do a sex tape or all these random things that humans or people who make mistakes do, because they have a script that they're abiding by and they're trying to appease. They're not real people. That is so much better to help a kid understand that. To, hey, look up to this person. Don't look up to this person. Like, if you are going to choose to allow them to look up to something like that, whether it be a video game, a movie, or whatever it is, do exactly what Jay was kind of talking there, and have that distinction between fiction and reality, to where stuff doesn't hit you that hard. It's I don't want to hit like a sad topic, but when a celebrity or an actor or any well-known person does unfortunately pass away, it doesn't, I'm trying to be as delicate as I can here, it doesn't hit me like a ton of bricks like some people will talk about online, to where they like, oh, I called in and didn't go to work because I'm this distraught right now. I'm like, if that is you, do you. I'm not going to say that that's not true for you, because I don't know you. That might be your life. But that makes no sense to me, because I didn't know this person. Like, I know what media has told me about him. I know what I think I know about him, but really all I know is what he's portrayed in movies or what he or she has done. Like, I don't really know that person. Like, I feel very bad for them, and more importantly, their families. I'm not going to say I'm happy about it, but I'm not so distraught that I'm calling into work and then being just absolutely wrecked mentally for the next couple. Like, that's the kind of stuff that happens when someone is real next to me that I had relations with. That's when that kind of stuff happens, which is that interchange between fiction and reality. Like, I wasn't holding on to that person as someone real close to me. I'm holding on to the characters that person played as something that might have been really close to me, which is why it doesn't hurt me crazily when something like that happens. Does that make sense in a way? Or am I just...
No, I completely understand where you're coming from. But at the same time, I also do understand it when, I think back to when Satoru Iwata passed away, the former president of Nintendo, the late, great Mr. Iwata. He worked on a lot of things that meant so much to so many people, like Earthbound really being his big, huge accomplishment or whatever. That game has a cult following. It's literally brought people together. I know there's a couple on YouTube, Stephen and Mallory George, that they literally met and got married because of this video game.
Go ahead.
And it's so, like, when someone like that passes away, I understand that, like, you can feel upset, you can feel sad about it or whatever. And I'm not taking that away, because, like, your grief and your distress is real and valid. But I'm kind of with you, Matt, where I separate those kinds of things, where, like, I didn't know Mr. Iwata, and I was sad when he passed away a little bit. I was like, man, like, that's so sad to hear about, because he was only like 55 years old. Cancer just whooped him, and it sucks, but like, but things like that just, they don't, because I didn't know him. I'm not close to him. He wasn't a part of my daily life.
The sad reality of, it seems like a very serious podcast. It's kind of a whole change of pace. The sad reality of things is that's life, and that happens a lot. Okay, and it's going to continue. I hate to say that, but it's not going to stop happening. Like, the more you dig in, and especially with media the way it is, to where we're getting to pretty much try to dig into people's personal lives, whether they consent to it or not, and trying to quote unquote connect ourselves with them. You're only going to see it more and more as you choose to find people to try to have that connection with, because we are all at some point in time going to pass away. Just is what it is.
That's what you think.
Jay says, au contraire.
I'm gonna live forever.
And, you know, that's why I kind of like what Jay was saying. The distinction between fiction and reality, I think, is very important, because you won't weigh yourself down as much, I would like to think. Now, granted, like we said, there's so many different people who handle things so many different ways and have so many different emotions, and not at any point saying that any of that is invalid. I'm just kind of making observations based on how we view things and how we handle things, and how it might be helpful to look at something some way, but you feel free to completely ignore it and just laugh at everything we're saying.
Yeah. But I mean, like, to get kind of more back on track,
there you go.
Or back to what we were originally talking about, I should say.
Right.
You can't blame a media for how someone handles something. You know, like, you can't say, oh, you know, this person who shot up, you know, this school or whatever, like all these tragic things that happen that truly are very tragic. You can't be like, oh, well, this person, he owned an Xbox and Call of Duty, therefore the video games made him do that. No. You are, as a person, you're responsible for your own decisions.
Absolutely. And, like, I hate any life situation where those kind of stupid, vague, basic correlations try to happen that just make no freaking sense whatsoever. Like, the only common thing there is that both of those were evolved around technically violence. That's about it. And
right.
One does not lead to the other. Like, that, the fact that they are similar and the fact that they're both violent has nothing to do with the fact that it happened. That's just an absurd thing. Like, I mean, as far, like, to me, when you make a correlation like that, I'm also hearing like, well, that guy ties his shoes in a way that no one else does. Clearly he is different-minded and was having issues, so he went and killed people.
Burn him.
Yep. So, like, I'm just like, this is just dumb. Like, you're just making really, really vague assessments and trying to, and what you're doing is choosing to ignore the hard question by trying to give it a simple answer. And the hard thing is that the truth of the matter is that someone, whether it be himself or someone that raised him, it could be himself, because I'm not always going to say it's the parents' fault, because it's not. You know, at some point in time, they got to be their own person, and they're going to make their own choices.
Right.
But I think there's always that meet in the middle to where something happens somewhere to where things happen that shouldn't have happened, or things should have happened differently, and you don't want to face the fact that you failed. Whether it be you failed yourself, or you failed your spouse, or your like whatever it is, it's so hard to face that, and it's so much easier to say, well, it was the video game's fault. Well, it was the movie's fault. Well, it wasn't my fault, kind of thing. And
yeah,
and I don't want to just include this to America. I'm sure this happens worldwide with the way media is now, but so many people do that with every single thing. Like, just nobody wants to take responsibility anymore, it seems like. And media, especially like the nerd culture thing, seems, at least for us too as gamers, it might be partial. We might just be a little biased on this, but it seems like we get it a little more than others do. Like, gaming will get blamed for things a lot more than other things do. And it might just be because we deal with it more. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with that. I hear a lot of things about, like, violent movies, violent TV shows, things like that. So
I suppose. I mean, like, like I said, it may just be depending, because I also got made, I don't want to say made fun of, but I got judged a lot in high school and college because I was very active in sports. So I'm also a nerd. So it's really funny that I got more made fun of by nerds than I did jocks. And what I mean by that is I was huge into football, and I'm huge into gaming and nerd stuff, and like just anything nerd culture. And I've never hidden that on either side. Like, all the people I play football with were very aware of the fact that I was nerdy. And all the people that I play games with were very aware that I was into sports. I've never hidden that either way. And right. I've definitely got more flack from the nerd culture about being into sports. And that it's just so funny to me, because all they would ever complain about is getting made fun of people that played sports, and then they would go do the same thing to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear that. I see that on Facebook, like every time the Super Bowl rolls around or whatever. People that, whether they're Trekkies or Whovians or gamers or whatever, nerd culture thing they're a part of. The Super Bowl rolls around and I get, I don't know, half a dozen Facebook statuses pop up per hour about, oh, all these idiots watching their sports ball game. And it's like, you're just doing to them exactly what they do to you, dude.
Yep. Never mind the fact, like, you do the same, like, oh, you're just watching a stupid E3 event. Like, it's easy to do that.
Yes.
Like, just because someone cares about something doesn't make it okay to go make fun of it.
Yeah, no, have your passions, man. It's like, there's a lot of things in the world that I'm not into. And that I think on a personal level, like for me, would be a waste of time. But, like, for example, I live next to a car wash where a lot of people who have like the big fancy cars that they mod it and they do all this stuff, they get together and they rev their engines, and show off their vehicles or whatever. I think that's an incredible waste of money. I think it's stupid. I think it's whatever. But I'm never going to knock anyone for that because that's a passion they have. And just because my big thing, whenever anyone says the phrase, like I was hanging out with a group of friends playing Ultimate Frisbee or whatever, and I was wearing a Pokemon shirt. And me and a couple of friends were talking about, the Nintendo Switch had just come out. We were talking about it. And then when we went back for round 2 of Frisbee, a couple of the people that were hanging around, and someone had walked up to me after and told me, like, hey, they were saying this about you and about these things. They were like, I just don't understand how people could spend so much time on video games or whatever. And I was like, well, you need to stop right there. I don't understand.
Right.
You don't understand it. Therefore, don't pass judgment on it. Like, I don't understand how someone could want to spend thousands of dollars a week on fixing up their car. I don't understand where they get that money from. That doesn't mean they're stupid. That doesn't mean that, I disagree with their lifestyle choices or whatever. It just means I don't get it. And that's fine. It's okay not to understand something.
That's a 100% accurate point. Like, just couldn't really say it any better. Like, if you ever are catching yourself saying, like, I just don't understand how, that's a very good place to stop.
Stop yourself right there.
Like, that's really all you need to say, and that's fine. Like, it's okay.
I don't understand how someone could spend every Sunday afternoon on a couch watching football. That's cool.
That's
don't
fine.
knock it.
You don't have to do it. I'm not going to make you do that with me. Like,
no.
My wife personally does not care about football. She doesn't like watching sports. She would rather be out there playing it, and I get that. So I, at no point, ever make her to watch any of that stuff. The same way, like, she loves Grey's Anatomy to high heaven, and she understands that I don't care about it, so she does not make me watch it.
Right.
It's just, it's such a simple concept that people just don't seem to follow. And to add on to what you were saying earlier about people always seeming to retaliate in something that they had just received and complained about, I have always, even since I was young, I've always stood by the statement, and I will always stand by the statement. If you were ever treated poorly in a certain way by a specific group of people, whether it be stereotypical or not, outlashing that back to another group is never going to be good. Ever.
No, it's wrong.
It's wrong. It's causing you to be a hypocrite, first of all, if you were ever complaining about it. Second of all, if all it does is make it continue to happen, you are effectively creating a loop that continues to make things just go in a everlasting circle because you chose to dish out the same thing that they gave to you, as opposed to taking the high road and just ignoring it or just moving on and being the better person. And I know there are circumstances to where sometimes people just push you to your limit because they're actually getting into bullying, and that's a whole nother instance in and of itself. We're just talking about when someone just heckles you or just gives you a hard time more than anything. Like, because bullying, I'm not going to say anything on that. If someone pushes you to your limit, then I don't want you to sit there and let them run you over or anything like that. I'm not saying anything like that. But it's just this thing that, even for me in high school, whenever someone did do something like that, I never chose to spit back at them and be like, well, what you do is stupid, or what this did. And even though I'm saying that I got it a lot, I never got it from the same person more than once, ever, because when they would do that, I would not give them what they were wanting, which is a fight. And I don't think people necessarily consciously do that, but it doesn't take much of sitting around media, whether it be Facebook or anything else, to see that people love to freaking bicker. Like, I don't know if they actually consciously realize they are bickering, but it just continues and continues and continues and continues. Like, it just seems that people just are infatuated with the fact of arguing illogically and angrily and stupidly with each other. And when you don't allow that to snowball, it kind of just cuts it off to where, and it does a weird thing to that person because they're like, I just made fun of that person and they didn't retaliate. What do I do?
Yeah.
How do I proceed from here?
And one of the big problems, like, as a culture, as a society, something that we have cultivated and allowed is victimization.
Oh, yeah.
We tell each other and ourselves or are taught that, like, because we're a victim to something, we're then justified in doing something back, you know? And it's not like overtly taught, like you don't learn that in first grade or whatever, but it just seems generally okay. Like, you know, because I was bullied or pushed around, that I'm kind of given a free pass to be a little resentful about that, or to be bitter, or to even do, you know, some bad things or whatever. But then when that escalates, you know, you have people like, oh, you know, my dad was killed by an African-American gentleman. That gives me the right to go to a black church and shoot up the joint, you know, or whatever. Like, that's not okay. And victimization is such a huge problem in our culture and in our society. It's one of the things I was taught at a young age from my mom, like when all this, you know, when I started to grow my own worldview or whatever, is that you cannot become a victim to your circumstances. There are tons of things that you cannot control throughout your life that are going to happen to you, that are going to happen to those around you, and you cannot become a victim to those things. You know, you can't do the whole, my daddy didn't love me, therefore I can be a horrible human being. You're not given a free pass just because you were dealt a crappy hand.
Absolutely. It's such a good point that I've always agreed with and say to people all the time. It's like, look, this whole victimization thing is just getting ridiculous because at any point in your life, for everyone, at some point, you're going to be made fun of. You're going to be given a hard time. You're going to not get things your way. Things are going to go in a bad direction. You're going to fail. There's going to be things that are not going to be great. And you need to know and understand how to deal with it like an adult and a respectable person.
Right.
That's just part of it.
And to bring this just full circle, just so we can wrap this up in a nice present or whatever, you can't then get your solutions or get your, your coping mechanisms from what you see portrayed in gaming or in media in general. You know, you can't, watch a TV show where this guy loses his job, so he goes out and picks up a drinking problem and does a whole bunch of terrible things. Like, that's not a healthy way of dealing with things. It makes for good TV or for a good, interesting storyline in a video game, but it makes for sucky real life.
Absolutely. It's the thing that Jay said at the very beginning of the episode is you have to be able to distinct between fiction and reality.
Yep.
Absolutely. That boils down, like, you can pick any form of media you want to, and that applies to every last bit of it. If you can't do that, then I will say, if whoever's doing it can't do that, then you might want to think about not letting them play. That might be a problem until they can.
Right.
Because that can lead to an issue when that's happening.
And to an extent, it's different for everyone.
Absolutely.
Right?
Like everything we ever talk about is going to be subjective to some point. Like there's always that one circumstance that you could point out if you want to nitpick. But, in most cases, we try to cover what we would feel would be a general concept of how most situations would work revolving around the concept we're talking about. I know there's going to be situations that are different, but in most circumstances, the things we're talking about would be a very valid way to look at things, especially some of the points that Jay's made throughout. Jay, give you a round of applause. You made a very good points in this episode.
I mean, thanks. This is a conversation I've had many times. I get a lot of parents from youth group or whatever that, because they know I'm a gamer, and they're like, hey, do you think this game would be appropriate for my kid? And I was like, well, these are all the things that are in this game.
Right.
Do you think your child would be able to distinct between, what's fun and okay to do in that game and what's not okay to do in real life? Even things like Pokemon. I've had parents be like, is my kid going to start believing in evolution just because they played Pokemon? I'm like, Pokemon's one of my favorite game series, and I'm a sticking pastor. Like, you tell me.
Because I'm going to be honest, every comment that Jay's ever made up at this point has pretty much been complete garbage. So it's actually good to see him hold his weight for one episode.
Oh no, I could go 12 rounds with anyone on this subject. Trust me, I'm a seasoned veteran on this one.
I'm pretty sure we both probably, because like if you didn't already know, me and Jay have, and Jay still is, but me and Jay have both been youth ministers at one point. So we've probably dealt with stuff like this more than your average Joe has with certain topics like this. But that's actually going to be it for today's podcast. We'll end it on a funny note because why not?
Yeah, I have no idea how you're going to edit that middle part there where Discord decided to well, actually, it was my internet decided to take a nap. But
oh, don't worry. Like I have a way of doing that. No one really knows it happened until you just said it out loud. And I'm of course going to leave that just to give Jay a hard time. But so that's going to be it for today's podcast. Thank you guys as always for listening. And it's very important that y'all actually comment on this. Like not important that you go do it. It's important to us that you do because like it makes a big deal. Like we really appreciate it. Whether it's something we agree with or disagree, don't care. I love to see it either way. Even
if you think BioShock 2 is a good video game, we still want to hear about it, even if you're wrong. No disrespect, Mr. Sargent. Your opinion is wrong.
But I want to give the question of the day over to Jay today. Gonna let him have it.
I'm just going to keep it as general as possible, honestly. I don't want to ask a specific question. I just want to know your thoughts. Like, did something stand out to you? Do you have an opinion? Do you're like, yeah, I agree with that, or I never thought of it that way, or I completely disagree with that? I want to know what you got out of this, if anything. And if you're like, man, I didn't like this episode, well, next week we'll get back together and we'll talk about just regular video game. Like, we'll just pick a game and just talk about it like we usually do. This was just kind of a special edition.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we're trying to, season 2, as Jay calls it, we're trying to shake things up a little bit and, not just be kind of monotonous, always doing a video game and doing the exact same format. Trying to give things a little bit of variety so you don't really know what to expect every week. And me personally, I've enjoyed it so far. I feel like from what I've heard, most people are enjoying it. But as Jay said, I mean, if you didn't like it, just make sure to let us know.
Like we've done a lot of different things over the course of quote unquote season 2 so far. Like we covered an event like E3, we covered a serious issue like we did in this episode. We had the Comedy Central roast of Niantic as a company or something like that. So like if any of these new things really stand out to you, like I really liked that episode, let us know. We'll do more of it because we've loved everything we've done so far. And if you want to...
Because we're extreme narcissists.
Exactly. And if you want us to focus on one thing in particular, like if you loved this episode, if you want to hear more serious conversations and less, fart jokes or whatever, just tell us, dude.
Absolutely. Or more boob jokes as we typically always do to each other.
Yeah, I guess we kind of go... We go to boob jokes and not fart jokes.
Very true. But as we always do, we make our outros stupid long. But that's going to be it for the podcast today. Thank you guys for listening. And we just really appreciate all of you who are listening, no matter who you are. I just want to say thanks for myself. I'm sure Jay feels the exact same way.
Absolutely.
And really hope to... have you here for the next episode. I have no idea what we're going to be talking about, but we will be here. And as always, we will see you next time.